increasing in the intensity of how much content there is for her. There is a considerable discussion of the woman who would cause a young man or a married man or any man to be troubled by the attachments of her ways. And that's not a very pretty picture that is described of her. Then we have chapter 12, verse 4, the great contrast. And I have not put as many scriptures in our text tonight, so you're going to need your Bibles a lot more this evening. I've been having 2 days to work on our Proverbs lessons as a rule, and Libby and I just got into town last night, so this is a one-day presentation instead, so not quite as many texts here. Chapter 12, verse 14. A man, that's not right. Chapter 12, verse 4. An excellent wife is the crown of her husband, but she who causes shame is like rottenness in his bones. Here's the two sides. A wife that is good is to a husband like a crown on his head. It is the jewel, it is the decoration, it is that which is valuable, it is on top of him, it is something wonderful in every way. On the other hand, the opposite side of that is a wife that is not good, that is not supportive to her husband, that does not have all the qualities that are valuable. That is a great detriment, rottenness, or some translations actually put there a cancer to his bones. Well, that's not a very good picture. So we have the two possibilities, either a very good thing or a very bad thing. Now, we could do the same thing with guys, couldn't we? You could talk about a good husband and a bad husband, and a good husband would be a great benefit to a wife, and a bad husband would be an anchor around her neck or whatever. So it's not something that is gender specific. It's just that Proverbs 31 is about wives. We'll have a discussion of those that are good. Proverbs chapter 18, and I'm going to read through these verses. It'll give you time, hopefully, to get there. We won't go any faster than I can turn there. 18:22, he who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. Now, I'm assuming that means a good wife, because we've already described a wife can be either good or bad, depending on some qualities that we'll describe later. Chapter 19, verse 14. Houses and riches are an inheritance from fathers, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. So our description of a woman in a relationship of a marriage that's good is a gift from God. But then there's the bad also. 19:13. A foolish son is the ruin of his father, and the contentions of a wife are a continual dripping. Interesting. Continual dripping. You ever had a drip in the faucet? That's not a big deal, is it? How about 2 o'clock in the morning when you're trying to sleep, or maybe before that? You're laying there trying to go to sleep and you hear this drip, 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 drip. How long do you put up with that before you want to do something about it? So it's not something that can't be tolerated. It is an irritation that just keeps going on. 21:9. Better to dwell in the corner of a housetop than in a house shared with a contentious woman. The corner of the housetop, that is translated by some translations of up in the attic. It'd be better to live in the corner of an attic than it would be to be in a big house with a troublemaking woman. I know there are troublemaking men. I'll just go ahead and make my disclaimer at the beginning. Everything you can say about a woman's behavior or attitudes that are inappropriate, the same is applicable to men. Verse 19, better to dwell in the wilderness than in a contentious or with a contentious and angry woman. So you'd rather be up in a corner of a housetop or out in the middle of nowhere than with that woman. Chapter 25, verse 24. We've read this one. It's a repeat. Better to dwell in a corner of a housetop than in a house shared with a contentious woman. Chapter 27, verse 15. A continual dripping on a very rainy day and a contentious woman are alike. And then another interesting passage in verse 16. Whoever restrains her restrains the wind and grasps oil with his right hand. Can you grab the wind? You stop the wind? What control do you have over the wind? Well, you can build a house and block it off, but you can't really control the wind. And so, can you grab oil with your hand? Now, you can put oil in a jar or in a bucket and grab it, but can you take up oil in your hand? What happens when you try to grab oil? Well, it's a liquid, of course, and it just slips right through your hand. So you can't grab oil with your hand. You can't grab or control the wind. And you can't control women. Let's rephrase that. You can't control others. You can't really control people. We are independent individuals. And when we get married, we have a relationship where you are bound together with someone, and there really is no control over a man. Let me give you an interesting story I heard on the, well, it wasn't a radio, it was a broadcast. I received some little things from AOPA, Aircraft Pilot Owners Association. They send stuff to me and about training and different kind of things. And I got one that was talking about communication with air traffic control. And the illustration that the guy used was, well, the word Roger only means I have heard what you said. And he was describing how that many pilots use that word incorrectly when they talk to air traffic control, assuming that it means yes or affirmative, which it does not. Roger only means, I heard you. He said, for example, one day my wife came down the stairs and she was heading out to go into town, and she said, before I get back, I'd like for you to wash the clothes that are in the laundry and vacuum the living room. He said, I was sitting there on the couch watching television. I said, Roger. She came in a few hours later, and the wash was exactly the same place when she left, and the vacuum cleaner had not been moved from the position it was. And she came in, he said she stomped in the living room, and she said, you said you were going to do these things. And he said, I did not. I said, Roger. And the word Roger means, I heard what you said. He said, we weren't married long after that. You can't control another person. The only control you have over another person is their desire. If they want to do something for you, with you, then they can and or will. And if they do not, you can't force them, male or female. And many a married partner has found out, to their chagrin, that it is impossible to take care of another. If y'all will pardon me for a moment while I address Brother Lon, that clock up there is either dead or has serious trouble. If it can be resurrected, Lon, you might want to give that clock a jog. If not, I think they're busy, actually. It's dead? No hope? All right. Well, Good thing I've got a cell phone. Let's progress. I've gotten distracted. Chapter 31 says it is about or from Lemuel. The words of King Lemuel, the utterance of that which his mother taught him. Now, the first part of the chapter, or verses 1 through 9, describe some things to him as a king, things he should do, relations with women, alcohol, how he should take care of those who are going to be needy, etc. And then we begin a discussion of the virtuous woman, also sometimes translated the noble woman. Beginning in verse 10 and going down through verse 31, which we always describe, is an acrostic. An acrostic is a series of letters which form a word, sometimes something we recognize. In this case, it's the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Het, Tet, Yod, Kaf, Lamed, etc., all the way through. 22 Hebrew letters. And each of them begins a discussion. And so it's just like having the ABCs listed, and you have something with A, and there's words that start with that. B, something there. C, something there. This is an acrostic. That's why there are 22 points, or 22 Hebrew words. There is no way to reproduce this in English and make any sense out of it because they're Hebrew letters, and they do not correspond to English words in the same way. Getting into the content of what takes place, beginning in verse 10. Now, there are some passages we may not get to, and in an attempt to try to get past that, let's first read it all together. Then we'll come back and put the pieces in. Who can find a virtuous wife? For her worth is far above rubies. The heart of her husband safely trusts her, so he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax and willingly works with her hands. She is like the merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. She also rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and a portion for her maidservants. She considers a field and buys it. From her profits she plants a vineyard. She girds herself with strength and strengthens her arms. She perceives that her merchandise is good, and her lamp does not go out by night. She stretches out her hands to the distaff, and her hand holds the spindle. She extends her hand to the poor. Yes, she reaches out her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of snow for her household, for all her household is clothed with scarlet. She makes tapestry for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them, and supplies sashes for the merchants. Strength and honor are her clothing. She shall rejoice in time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and on her tongue is the law of kindness. She watches over the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many daughters have done well, but you excel them all. Charm is deceitful, and beauty is passing, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. Let's talk about some of these sections. First of all, her value to her husband. I need to ask a question since I'm not a woman. Is it demeaning for the description of this virtuous woman to be described as her worth is above rubies? Is it insulting for you to be compared to money or to fine gems, to rare gems? How do we value people? I don't know that there's a way to do that. I don't know that there's a way to value anyone. If you're talking about a worker, if you're talking about your family members, your children, there's no real way to describe, in terms of a monetary relationship, a value. But there's no attempt to see this woman as being equal to X dollars. Instead, there's the concept that she is of such great value that even rare gems would not be sufficient to compare to her. Far above rubies. Why is she so valuable? Well, because of what takes place with her. Her husband's heart safely trusts in her. Let's talk about trust for a second. What kind of relationship can you have without trust? Who do you trust? Any of you have somebody work on your car? I know some of you do your own work. You have somebody work on your car? Any hands? Okay, a few. Do you take your car to someone that you don't trust? I had a pair of pants I sent to the cleaners one time. They came back with a note attached. Sorry. I was able to later talk with the cleaners and get some reparations made. The pants were ruined. Do you think I took any more pants to those cleaners? No. Do you trust your husband? Do you trust your wife? Don't answer that. Don't even shake your head. Just think about it for a minute. The basic relationship of a marriage requires trust. And if you cannot trust that person, then you're in big trouble. But this is not just that he trusts her, he safely trusts her. She is worthy of that trust. On a pretty regular basis, I get to meet or get to see people that I haven't run into for a long time. I run into college friends, and we'll talk about different things. Sometimes we'll talk about other friends. Well, have you seen so-and-so in a while or whatever? And unfortunately, from time to time, it's more often than I'd like, someone will, in conversation, say, well, did you hear about this person? No, I didn't. Well, he or she ran off with somebody. You're kidding. Just last week, I was talking to somebody I hadn't talked to in a while. They would ask about a friend of ours. And he said, well, they're divorced. I said, what happened? Well, she was working with a guy, and apparently she decided she liked him better than she liked her husband. Left her children, 3 kids, went off, ran off with this guy. I said, you have got to be kidding. Not kidding. That story has been replayed on both sides, him and her, lots of times. But he safely trusts her because she is going to be there and provide for her. And because of that, there will be a lot of things that come. There will be no lack of gain. No lack of gain means there will be gain. There will be things that come to you because you trust in this woman, and there's going to be descriptions of her as she goes forward. She does him good and not evil. It's not enough to be neutral in your relationships and especially in your family. It's not okay if you just don't beat your wife, or if you just don't do things to your husband that are untrustworthy. It's not enough to be neutral. It's not enough to have the absence of bad. We also need the presence of good, that you do good things for them. She does him good. How long does she do him good? As long as he does good for her, she does him good all the days of her life. It is a lifelong thing. The second area descriptive of this woman is that she works, and there are so many issues here. We could spend the whole night talking about that, but let's describe it in a general sense first. She works by watching over her house. Verse 27. She takes care of all of the things of her household, and she is not idle. There is a value in doing something meaningful and having something valuable to do in life. If you have a purpose, then your life, as a rule, will be much more fulfilled than if you feel like you have nothing to do. If you don't have a purpose, if you don't have something valuable, meaningful, then you're left with the problem of, what am I going to do with my time? I'll try not to get off on a tangent here too far. When I hear stories about those who we might describe as the rich and famous and the many problems that they experience, I have to confess that I have a little sympathy for them. That I didn't say I have little sympathy. I have sympathy for them. Because they're in a problem, many of them. They have money. They have servants. They have the needs or the desires of their heart fulfilled. They can go buy anything they want. I've seen and read descriptions of, they have a summer house here and a winter house there, and they own this $5.8 million mansion on this coast, and they have this $10.8 million chalet over here in this country, and they have all of this property down here, and they have all of this stuff up here, and they jet over here, and they run over there, and they play over here, but they don't have meaningful lives. There's really nothing required for them, in many cases, to put their effort into so that real life and death is involved in the efforts that they are involved with every day. And you are, we are, I am. There's value there. When you wake up and you know that you provided for the needs of our family. And when people are bored, they get into all kinds of trouble because they look for something to spice up and excite their lives. Solomon is going to describe in the book of Ecclesiastes, which I hope to start next week, the vanity of life without certain things in place. That life has no meaning. Well, finding that meaning is often found in work that we do with our own hands and with our own life. This woman's life and most women's life are self-directed. You don't have a boss. You don't have somebody telling you, get up and do this. Do you? Okay, if you do, I don't really want to know. No, you don't. It's up to you to take care of those things. Your husband, if you're married, expects you to take care of certain things. You expect him to take care of certain things. If you're not a self-starter, there's going to be a problem here. She's going to be a worker. And then we're going to see several areas of it. Number one, she has some domestic work to do. Verse 13 describes she is a willing worker. She seeks wool and flax and willingly works with her hands. I've known of people who it seemed like their goal in life was to see how little work they could do. Really. That was their goal. Just how little you could do to get by, how easily, how quickly, how whatever. That's not this woman. She works willingly. She does above and beyond what may be required because she's after excellence. The pursuit of wool and flax. You're dressed in nice clothes. How long would it take to make the garments you're wearing? How long would it take to make the garments you're wearing if you had to make the cloth and then had to sew it? Wool and flax are gathered together to make the cloth of tapestries, of the various everyday clothings that people wore and various things. It describes her here that she puts out her hands to the distaff, verse 19. She holds the spindle. That's descriptive of taking raw material, turning it into thread, and then that thread into a piece of cloth, and then taking that cloth and forming clothing out of it. How long would it take to do that? She is like a ship that goes and comes and brings the gifts that are needed for her life. She gathers and produces her own products. She's up early to feed her family, verse 15. It doesn't bother me to tell you about my mother. I feel a little self-conscious and guilty sometimes about telling you about what a wonderful mother I had. I can see so many of these traits in her. In my house, when you got up, Mom was up. She was always up. Often fixing stuff for the family, making breakfast. If it was late, often getting together things for the next day. She took care of our home. When my mother passed, my dad was thrown into having to do some things that he'd never done before. My sister said Daddy didn't know how to do the washing machine. He's a competent guy. He worked it out, but he'd never had to. My mother always did that. She took care of those needs. Some of you had mothers like that as well. That they were always working, that you had the clothes you needed, you had the food you needed, you had the supplies you needed. When anything came up in life, the first word out of your mouth was, Mom. And they were there ready to supply those needs. That's the way most families function. And they depend on her to provide for those things. And a man who has that good wife, a woman by him to take care of all of the domestic issues of life, of food and shelter and clothing and the things that come up, there's no way to put a price on that. You may not have to make clothes now, but you still need to go buy them and make sure that they're taken care of appropriately, and cleaning and so many other things. There's a whole list of domestic that we might talk about. 2, she has described here, there's an economic work. Verse 16 says she considers a field and buys it, and from her profits she plants a vineyard. What does that mean? I don't know how to make that mean anything other than it already says. This woman was involved in business transactions to take care of property. Would that happen at your house? Don't answer that. Years ago, I was in Oklahoma City, and a man in the congregation where I lived in Summerville, Tennessee, got me in contact with his son who lived in Oklahoma City. His name, now this is going out in broadcast now, I won't say names. We were off eating lunch together. He worked out getting my first job there in Oklahoma City with a friend of his. And we're off, and he said, let me tell you about my wife. Well, his wife had just graduated from college. They'd gotten married fairly young, raised 2 children, and now her children were in high school and going off to college themselves. And she decided to go back to school, finished up her college degree, and so he was buying her a car. He bought her a brand new Mercedes-Benz. Had it sitting in the driveway with a big red bow, and I mean big red bow. The ribbon was about a foot wide, wrapped all around this car. He was a successful real estate developer. They had money. They weren't extraordinarily rich, but they definitely were well off. But he was telling me about his wife, and he said, I came home from a business trip, and he said, let me tell you what she'd done. She had made an investment in an oil well. And it was paying off big time. Of course, we lived in Oklahoma City. There were a lot of oil well transactions, and we were in the oil business, so, that was going on. But he said, how many wives do you know of, when you come home, she would have made a substantial monetary investment in life? I didn't know how to respond to that. I was 21 years old. I knew one wife, that was my wife, and I'd known her for less than a year. This is not normal, or at least it's not the way we normally see things. I think there is a tendency to see, in general, wives as the sheltered, protected. There's a misinformation sometimes about the translation of the King James Version, keepers at home, which I think probably a better translation is keepers of the home. Most translations have that in the New Testament. And this is a description of a very different picture of a woman involved, making and selling clothing for others. makes linen garments and sells them, supplies sashes for the merchants. Verse 24. Yes, Brother Kerry. Oh, absolutely. But he's usually there. One of our young ladies in the congregation, I won't embarrass her, Emily was telling me that she went to, well, I guess I will embarrass her, won't I? She went to buy a car. Walked onto the car dealership. She was looking around at these cars and looked and said she received a casual treatment. But then one of the guys said, now just bring back your husband when you're ready to buy. She said, I'm not married. He said, well, then bring back your daddy. And she said, he won't be involved in this. Oh. Are we condescending toward women? Ma'am, would you like the microphone? just speak up. Speak up. Ladies, I'm going to give you an opportunity to say amen if you'd like to. It is a tough world. And as a rule, and even in our country, although it is an easier role than it is in some, women do not have an equal life with men. But this woman was not a sit in the house, behind the doors, do nothing kind of woman. She is out there in life. This is a biblical model. This is that worthy woman. Let's talk about her preparedness, verse 17. She strengthens her own body. She girds herself with strength and strengthens her arms. I'm not sure that I want to go too far there, but she's taking care of herself. This is not a weakling. She recognizes that there's a need to take care of things, and she does so. She's planning for the future. Verse 18, her lamp does not go out by night. That is something that requires some things to be done in advance. Jesus told the story about the young virgins who did not make appropriate preparation, and when the bridegroom came, they weren't ready. They'd all fallen asleep, but some of them were not able to keep their lamps continually burning, and they were dismissed. She made the preparations that were necessary to look forward to the future. Verse 21, she's not afraid of the snow of her household. Her household is clothed with scarlet. The word that's translated scarlet can also be translated double or twice. And some translations have this instead, that they are clothed with warm clothes, that they don't just have the summer garments, but that they have adequate clothing. They have doubled up. She's not afraid of cold weather. She's made preparations for it. She's looking forward to the future. She'll rejoice in the times that are to come. And what should she receive? She does not eat the bread of idleness. She's not sitting around. She is out taking care of those things that will be done in the future. There are several general qualities that are described. She is strong, verse 25. Honorable, also in verse 25. If you, that's not right. I lost my place. Strength, yes. Strength and honor are her clothing. I have on there 25b, but that's still 25a for strength and honor. She is wise, verse 26. She opens her mouth with wisdom, but she's also kind. I left out one slot in here. She also has time for the needy, verse 20. Not only does she provide for her own family, but verse 20 says she extends her hand to the poor. She reaches out to the needy, so she's got enough to take care of her own family and others. The statement in verse 30 has two things that are descriptive of limited value: charm and beauty, but compared to something that is of great value: reverence or dedication to the Lord. In our world, charm and beauty are probably much more prized in general. I don't know if it's in all cultures, but in the American culture, there is a preoccupation with beauty. There is a drive, a fascination. It is economically valuable. We sometimes, and I don't mean for this to be an insulting remark, but we talk about people who have trophy wives. And what that usually describes is either an older or a wealthy man who has married a beautiful, often younger woman. There's no real doubt that most of the people who find themselves before on camera, whether it's on local television or on national TV or movies, are well above what we would describe as average looks. There is an attraction for physical attraction. Yet, in real life, in terms of the live together, draw something from it, our author says those who are charming, those who have that special quality of charmingness, and this doesn't mean that you've got good manners. This is more of the sophisticated issues that come up. That and beauty are fleeting, that they are only momentary value. But something that lasts always is a dedication to the Lord. When Peter talked about wives, he said, don't let the preparing of your body be what you show to your husband, but instead show them the value of a woman who is dedicated to the service of God, so that they may be won even without a word because of how you live. When they see your chaste life, when they see your dedication and your devotion to God, that's what they see. That's not our world. At least doesn't tend to be our world. And she's going to be praised. How is she going to be praised? Verse 28, her children rise up and call her blessed. I've had the experience, I'll call it a privilege, of listening to a lot of people tell me about their mother. It's usually been after that mother has passed away, and they tell me about her and her qualities. And sometimes with tears in their eyes, but always with joy in their hearts, they'll describe the things that she did and how she took care of them and her qualities and her love and her gentleness and her attention to them, and on and on and on the list will go, and they have satisfaction in describing her in good terms. And if you're a mother, you're going to play an incredible role in the lives of your children. If your children are grown, you still have a great value in the lives of your children. My mother was an important part of my life until the day she passed away. She continues to be an important part of my life from memory. And she still provides a great deal of guidance to me because of what she said when she was alive. And a woman who raises her children and teaches them character, they're going to say about her wonderful things. And the contrast is also true. Secondly, she is going to be praised by her husband. Her husband is going to rise up and say things about her. He praises her. The verse 29, is a statement. My Bible actually puts it in quotes, a statement of the husband as he praises her. Many women have done well, but you are above them all. This is a man talking to his husband. You've been a great wife. You've done wonderfully. This is that virtuous woman. It does my heart good to hear men talk well about their wives. I used to have a friend when we were together years ago in Summerville, Tennessee. And one of his pet peeves was seeing or hearing couples argue in public. And James used to say, it bugs me to death to see men and women fighting in public or criticizing each other in public, and that shouldn't be the way. Well, I went out to eat several times with he and his wife. Guess what we experienced over meals? A lot of time there was conflict there. And I was thinking, yep, well, no wonder you don't like it. I like to hear people talk good about their husband or wife. Let me tell you about my husband, someone will say. Let me tell you about my wife. We don't do that much. Maybe there's not a forum for it. Maybe you really don't want to know. But it's a great thing when you can speak, and the words you want to tell others are about your husband's or wife's good traits, and especially hear about her. Number 3, or the last one on our list, the rewards of her effort. Give her what she has earned. What has she done? She's taken care of this family. She has provided for the well-being of this family. She has filled their bellies. She has clothed their bodies. She has cleaned their homes. She has taken care of all of their needs. Give her what she is due because of that. What kind of salary should a woman earn who stays at home and takes care of a home all day? I can't afford it. You can't either. She works beyond her pay. That doesn't take away from a woman who then goes out and does other things. This woman in Proverbs 31 is involved in all kinds of things in life. Is she valuable? More than precious stones, she is valuable. Chapter 31, lots left, but we'll conclude there. Thank you for your time and attention. Look forward to seeing you again next week.